Anyone ever found a body? What's that like? My granddad was a few months shy of 90 and still lived by himself. He was pretty spry. My mom called him every morning. One day he didn't answer, so she called me to go over and check on him. They lived about 40 minutes away, and I lived about 5 minutes away. I let myself in and found him in his easy chair holding his phone. He was cold. My dad showed up in about 20 minutes and we both cried. I called the police and they came in, checked it out, and did us a favor of calling the funeral home we asked. My dad said he was talking with him about 9 PM the night before and said he was sounding groggy. So he said goodnight, and granddad must have rested and passed. He was a great guy. I found my dad's body after he killed himself last year. He was lying face down on his bed, so the blood had pooled down to his stomach and face, making him almost unrecognizable. His face was smooshed in, and his body was mottled blue. As he had killed himself during the night, it was an overdose. He mixed bottles of pills, oxycodone, Flexeril, Ativan, amitriptyline, and more, with alcohol and stopped breathing. I'll never forget time slowing down and feeling as if I wasn't there. I have severe anxiety and have dissociated before, but the dissociation that hits you when you experience trauma like this is truly something else. I knew he was dead, but my mind wasn't letting me acknowledge it. I was apparently screaming, and I don't remember doing so. I tried to wake him up. I called to him and touched his shoulders and accidentally stepped in the puddle where he had peed himself. Feeling how stiff and cold his body was jarring. I was still in shock, but I remember it finally semi-clicking in my brain that he was dead the moment I touched him. I called emergency services, but don't remember the process of doing so. My dad had been suicidal for years, and I was used to taking care of him during his drug and alcohol such. I had been mentally preparing myself for this moment for years. He had tried to mutilate and shoot himself a year before, and I'd cleaned his blood then. I had even worked crime and trauma scene cleanup for a few years. I've seen terrible things. I've cleaned blood, brain matter, bone, and more. But finding my own dad dead shocked me so much that I finally blacked out as he was wheeled away. I ended up having to clean everything up again, even after I had made my dad promise me he'd never do this to me again. Nothing will ever completely prepare you for losing a loved one or finding a body. No matter how much you may think you're desensitized or used to it, or think you may be okay, in the end nobody knows how they will react. To this day, my family's screams of anguish are what I remember the most from that day. The absolute worst part is the guilt and shame that rocks through you. You wonder if there was something you could have done to save them. You wonder if they'd still be alive if only you had done X or Y. Over a year later, and I'm still suffering these thoughts. I would never wish this on anyone. Went to check on my uncle because he'd not been heard from. I knew before I got the front door open that he was dead by the smell. He was in his recliner. Drank himself to an early grave. I fear that this is going to be how I find my mom. When you walked in and knew by the smell, did you still go and look at him or call the police first? Found my dad dead heart attack one morning as a 7-year-old, Then when I was 8 I found my grandfather dead fell, hit his head, into tub full of water one morning. One night I was out walking my dog along a country road where a ditch accompanied the road either side. As I was walking my dog started going mad trying to tug away from his lead to this ditch, so I wanted to see what it was. It ended up being a corpse. So I called the cops. They found out that a gang murder happened in a city about 40 miles away, and one of the members thought a small village would be a great place to put it. A full family, father, mother, 2 kids dead in an upside down car on a dark road. I was at the shooting range once, my first time actually, and an older gentleman shot himself in the stall closest to the door. Everyone had to walk right past his body to evacuate. Gruesome. It looks more disturbing in real life than the movies, and everything moved more slowly once I saw it. I was just getting comfortable with my weapon when they called a ceasefire, and I stood there wondering what had happened. Suddenly it was calls of everybody get out. Now. Go. Go. Pretty terrifying when you can't initially see what's on either side of you because of the lane barriers and you're wondering what the hell happened so bad we're evacuating. Then just really sad to realize what happened. There was a kid there about 10 years old with his dad and brother. Hate it. My friend from school crashed his van outside my house one night coming back from a party. He was 15 and driving illegally. It was about 1 AM and I heard the crash and was first on the scene. I didn't have a cell phone, so I wasn't the one who called 911. He died on impact, and seeing his body was the moment I no longer felt like a kid. I worked at a retirement home for about a year. More specific at the dementia part of the house, and we had one man who every day was worried sick for his wife who has been dead for 8 years. On his birthday both of his daughters showed up and talked and showed slot of pictures. He didn't remember his daughters, but he recognized his wife. Tears of joy he watched pictures and told stories. The morning after, when I went to wake him up he was dead. He had a big smile on his face, and it was somehow very beautiful. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell me boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heatwave in the middle of summer. I call the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that peeping smell. In November of 2004, I had a very best friend who lived 3 blocks from me. We were both managers of the same restaurant, but I had recently graduated from college and had started my career path, but still worked with him on weekends and school vacations. One freezing cold Monday night, the restaurant called saying he hadn't shown up for work. I had a key so my roommate and I walked over. Upon entering his apartment, he was dead on the couch after taking more than 1 bottle of Ambien and a handle of vodka. I don't remember all the details of what I remember from the scene or what it looked like. I'm paying a lot of money in therapy to forget. Our town's baseball field's for Little League is in front of a small fence row of woods with an interstate on the other side. One hot day in July like 90th all week everyone at the game started smelling something awful. A couple of the dads and coaches went to go look and there was a dead guy on the interstate side of the fence row. I guess a trucker broke down and was walking for help and died of heat stroke. I was playing baseball and never actually saw, but still a crazy day. We found a body washed up in the rocks on the beach. I was taking photos of vultures because they were sitting on the rocks and they were pretty large. I first saw his distended stomach and followed it down to his foot. I grabbed my husband and said, "That's a body. Is that a body? Oh my gosh, that's a body." After double checking, we walked away to call 911. Checking a third time. From a different angle, I saw some of his skull missing and the unmistakable human hand. Somehow, we were able to get cell service long enough to tell the 911 dispatcher which state park we were in. Ambulance, firefighters, state police, a Coast Guard helicopter, truck and boat all showed up. It was amazing to watch. They carried him up in a body bag, placed him on the asphalt, and left him there for 30 minutes. It was just another day to first responders. Oddly, we are thankful to have found him, because he was on part of the beach no one ever crosses a river to get to. The tide was coming in when he was pulled out. Had we not found him, when we found him, the crabs and vultures would have finished him off. His family would have never had answers. I don't know his name or anything other than what we witnessed. We are fine. Our trauma of finding a body is nothing compared to what his family would have endured, never knowing what happened to him. Got back to my GF's house after doing some grocery shopping for her mom, and when we went inside, something was off. Found her older brother with slit wrists in the tub just about the time their mom pulled into the driveway. It was unpleasant. Not me, but my dad did. He was fishing and found a guy floating in the Kentucky River. He at first thought it was a dead cow until he paddled closer. The man was badly decomposed and bloated. Our local small town sheriff's department used my dad's boat to transport the body. My dad had trouble sleeping for a while afterward and sold the boat a few weeks later. My grandpa found a body decades earlier in the same area and my uncle did too. It's believed the guy my dad found accidentally fell in while high on meth. Back in the mid-80s, fresh out of college, got a job on a survey crew for the summer working on a section of highway just off of Interstate 80 in Wyoming. We always came across dead animals that had been hit by cars. But one day we had pulled off in a secured spot to eat lunch when we saw something out in the field literally 40 miles from the nearest town flopping around. We just passed it off as some deer that had been hit by a car and had crawled into the field to die. We went on and ate our lunch. Before we went back to work, our survey crew leader said, "Let's go take a look at what that is." The closer we got, we all knew it was a human being. She was still alive. Barely, but still alive. We radioed in what we discovered, and within about 30 minutes an air ambulance was on the scene. Before the ambulance got there we gave her water, but didn't move her. She couldn't speak, but we could tell she was thankful we were there and found her. They flew her down to Colorado, where she made a full recovery. Turned out she was traveling cross country with her boyfriend when they got into an argument and he decided to off her and dump her body. Thing was, she wasn't dead when he dumped her body where we found her. He had beat her and strangled her with a rope, and when she passed out he thought she was dead and dumped her. Never heard any more, but only know she made a full recovery and the guy went to prison. Came across a drunk driving accident. Probably happened a minute or two before we drove up to it, since no one else was there, and it was on the highway. 65 miles per hour speed limit. It was awful. Called the cops and went to see if we could help, but they were clearly dead. One had been ejected out of the windshield and was lying on the highway. The driver turned out to be 20 years old. Really sad. I found my dad after he hung himself. It was obviously extremely traumatizing and has taken a lot of therapy. I still get triggered if a movie shows a hanging scene, but I'm doing a lot better. Was with my mom. We were doing an occupancy check because this guy's hadn't paid his rent. This behavior was normal for the people who live on the property, so we go in and see if the apartment was empty. I go to the back room and he's dead in bed. Found 4, all at once. Well, actually, the 4th body had been jammed so far under the front passenger seat that I didn't see it. Wear your damned seatbelts, people. I used to work in self-storage, and when I left, a buddy of mine took over the property I used to manage. We took a weekend off from our respective jobs to go to Vegas a few years ago. He lived on site in a company apartment. When we got back late in the evening, he walked around his property as is pretty typical. There was a car parked with someone in it. He knocked on the window and got no response. He called me and told me about it, and as I was close by, I told him I'd be right there. As I got close to the car, I could smell death. The car was locked and all the windows were fogged up inside. It was obvious that the person inside was dead. He called the police and they responded with fire and medical. Yeah, the guy was dead. Reviewing the security cameras showed him come in and park there about 36 hours earlier. It was an overdose. I don't think it was ever determined to be accidental or suicide.